Hi, my name is Michael Ostroff, and I'm a PhD physics student at FAU. Today I would like to talk to you something which isn't actually related to physics, but is actually more related to computation. Good fauna. I would like to talk to you something not necessarily related to physics, but actually more of computation. So I think that consciousness is purely computational in nature. And therefore substrate independence must be true. So I suspect that consciousness is inherently computational in nature, meaning that substrate independence is true. I suspect that a certain class or subset of problem-solving computations are conscious, and that these computations in particular are atypically efficient. If they weren't, then our evolution wouldn't have made us conscious, it would have made us philosophical zombies. However, since we are conscious, this must mean that conscious computation has an advantage over unconscious computation, which is why we are not philosophical zombies in the first place. I suspect that the problem that our consciousness is continuously solving is the problem of, what do I do next? So we're getting all this input into our brains, the textures that we can see, the images which or visuals which our eyes perceive, and the sounds that we're hearing. All that is going into our brain, it's getting processed, and then all that processed information is then used by the brain in some sort of massive conscious computation in order to figure out what exactly does the body, or is it going to do next? What signals is it going to send to through its nerves to different parts of the body? So these because these inputs are so this conscious computation from our sensory inputs, because it's being directly integrated in this conscious computation, I think that that's why we perceive it as qualia. That and those inputs having some sort of structural properties. I think that if we were to look at some objects in the distance, such as a squirrel, your unconscious mind, or unconscious mind, I'll get to that later, labels it as a squirrel and then feeds it that into your brain with that labeling. But because that labeling isn't actually proper qualia, you don't really perceive it, but you are able to take it into consideration when you're choosing what your next actions will be. So these conscious computations, you can let's say you have a set of algorithms, and these algorithms say they can take in a set of various inputs, and they will all have the exact same outputs. And if you were to and I think that it's possible that there are some of these algorithms that they could do this computation in a conscious way, and that there are other algorithms which could do this computation in an unconscious way. So basically, this would mean that you can't look at how some entity is behaving and definitively determine whether it's a philosophical zombie or if it's actually conscious. You would actually have to know which algorithms it's actually running in order to determine its actions in the world. An example of this would be the following thought experiment. Imagine you have several conscious programs, like Alice, Bob, and some other friends, and these are running off some deterministic algorithm on a computer. They all receive inputs about the world, and they all give outputs, and they decide to go and interact with each other in our setup, and they talk with each other, and they're currently trying to determine, is Alice conscious, or is Alice a philosophical zombie? And they go back and forth with Alice, asking Alice a bunch of questions and discussing things in detail with Alice, and hanging out together, and then they make their determination. However, because this is all fully deterministic, you could have just been recording everything that Alice has been doing for that entire conversation, and restart the simulation with like the exact same initial conditions. Then you could take the recording you made of Alice's actions and make like replace Alice with a philosophical zombie, which essentially just replays all of Alice's actions, like word for word, movement for movement, essentially. So from like Bob and like company's perspective, this like zombie Alice, or Zalice for short, behaves exactly the same way that Alice behaved in the first go around. Therefore, from their perspective, like they can't really determine whether they're talking to Alice or Zalice. There's nothing that they can really, like, they're capable of doing to determine like if the person they're talking to is conscious or not, which is like kind of an interesting thing in my opinion. These conscious computations, I believe that they're a bit more general than like consciousness as like we know and perceive it. I believe like that this like class of problem solving computations is like that are like possess consciousness are extremely broad. So and I think that thoughts like the quality of thinking, I suspect that those are also conscious computations in and of themselves. So if you were given like 1 + x = 2 and you had to solve for what x was, like we can easily do that with like some unconscious computations. And it's like very like trivial. But I think that you could do this computation with conscious computations, and it would have like this felt quality of experience of thinking about like this problem and coming to the conclusion that x = 1. So because of this, like I think that our unconscious mind is actually conscious but not integrated with like what we consider our conscious mind, essentially. So if you were to look out into like the world around you, you would see a bunch of objects and structures all around you, and your brain essentially like properly like classifies everything that you're seeing, like if it's like relevant enough, and like puts on a bunch of labels onto like everything. And I think that this computation like is actually like conscious, but it's not like integrated into like it's not properly integrated into the part of your brain which is like solving the problem of what to do next. So you don't like consciously realize that's like going on. You don't consciously perceive it. It's not like tethered together, essentially. So that information about like the labelings of all the objects around you, that's then passed onto the conscious computation, and you're able to use it in your decision making. But like the part of your mind which like still did that computation, like it's still conscious. So this suggests we might be able to create like programs which are able to use like this atypically efficient conscious computation to solve like various different like problems in a more efficient manner, like object recognition, among other things probably. And even though they're like conscious, they're not like people, essentially, like because it's not like tethered together with like the stuff which makes like a person. So it's like it's not like a philosophical zombie, technically speaking, but it's like not a person. It's like, I'd like to say maybe it's like somewhere in between. So an example of like that, the unconscious mind being conscious, or to aid in that like discussion, I would like to talk about blind sight for a moment. So blind sight is this like weird phenomenon in which there are people who like when they open their eyes and they look out into the world, they do not see the world around them. It's just like blackness, essentially. So they aren't consciously like perceiving that qualia, essentially. However, if you put a bunch of obstacles in a hallway and you had the person with like blind sight go and walk down the hallway, they're like their eyes, like they still work. The part of the brain which like does that labeling and stuff, that still works. It's just that the signals with like the visual qualia, that's just not getting sent to the part of the brain which is determining what do I do next. So essentially this person, when they're walking, their brain has access to the qualia of like the non-visual quality of like the labeling system, so it can see like where the objects are without even like realizing it, and it takes that into consideration, and the person with blind sight will then walk around those obstacles in the hallway and not trip over them. And that's like, it's really weird, but I kind of think that's how like blind sight like works, I guess, essentially. So another weird aspect of this like computational consciousness idea is it kind of suggests that like panpsychism is like true to an extent. So allow me to explain. There are these things called billiard ball computers, where like if you have like a bunch of like billiard balls which are like bouncing around like off each other in different ways, you can have them perform like various different like computations. And so you could imagine like building like a NAND gate out of billiard balls, and then using like those NAND gates to build like more and more complex computers which can do like arbitrary computations. So you can imagine a monatomic gas as essentially like a bunch of billiard balls like bouncing around off each other, and you can imagine like gases in general as like a bit like kind of similar, but like maybe a bit more complex, I guess. Anyways, you can imagine a billiard ball computer spontaneously forming in like a gas and performing some random computations within like that gas before like it flies apart after it's done doing its like computation. And if consciousness is a like fully computational phenomenon, then it stands to reason that every so often there's like some minute conscious computation which is done. Like let's say the conscious computation is like 1 plus x equals 2, solve for x. And so essentially every so often like a little chunk of gas essentially has the thought that like 1 plus 1 equals 2. And this would suggest that if you had like a large like amount of gas, it would constantly be like thinking these exceedingly like it'd be constantly thinking these exceedingly trivial like thoughts, like 1 plus 1 equals 2, like over and over again, which is like kind of like odd. I mean, like in this view, like consciousness isn't like, it's not like fundamental or anything, but like you would expect like this kind of stuff to happen with like some frequency and any like body of like gas. It's essentially like a really terrible Boltzmann brains, like it's a bunch of Boltzmann brains which are like constantly popping into existence, performing extremely banal like computations, and then just poofing out of existence. So kind of a weird thing to think about, I suppose. I feel I should try to clarify that I think thoughts like in general are like conscious computations. So if you were to like take any like problem that you might like solve in your head and think about it and then like get like an answer, then that would be like some conscious computation with some like sort of like qualia associated with it, like some thought qualia, I guess. So I think another thing about these like computations is I suspect like they're instantiated, like, okay, so we have our reality and there's like some fundamental field or fields which like abides by some sort of like evolution equation, and that gives rise to this complex system with like all these like intricate behaviors. And in that system, it can sort of instantiate these like computations, and a subset of these computations that can be instantiated within like this reality are going to be conscious. I suspect if you were to take a like conscious computation and instantiate it like several different times within like a if you were to instantiate it several different times, then it would kind of only be consciously perceived like once, really, because if they're like the exact same computations, then there isn't going to be any like differences essentially in like the multiple instantiations. So going back to that like cloud or like a box of gas which is thinking like 1 plus 1 equals 2, like that same exact thought and like that felt quality of experience, it would like essentially only be like perceived once, I guess, but it would be instantiated like several different times in this cloud. And also whenever somebody is thinking like what is like x and like 1 plus x equals 2, like it would also be instantiated there as well. But in that case, the information about like the result of the computation, that would be like extracted and put to like use. It wouldn't be like a useless garbage computation, essentially. To recap, basically consciousness is a like I suspect it's a computational like phenomenon that our like notions of it are a bit too animal centric. I suspect it's like if there's more alien kinds of consciousnesses than we would normally believe. I don't think it's actually necessarily associated with like intelligence, but it's just purely problem solving. So you could have like a really stupid like system which has like virtually no qualities like we would associate with like personhood, but it would still be capable of some like conscious computation and therefore like felt quality of experience. But because it's like not actually a person, and like it's just only like doing some conscious like computations, like you don't necessarily have to like, it's not like, so like with like things which are performing conscious computations, there can be like ethical dilemmas with it, like if the conscious computations are like person-like enough. But if they're not, like I think you could like segment everything properly such that like the end result is like not a person and there aren't any like moral quandaries. Oh, an example of this would be something I would call like a like puppet master like AI thing. So you know when somebody's playing like D&D, how they like are pretending to be like the dungeon master's pretending to be a whole bunch of different characters, but like when those characters get attacked by like the player characters, the dungeon master doesn't feel pain. Like when they die, the dungeon master doesn't die. Like the dungeon master isn't actually those characters, they're just like acting. I think it would be possible to essentially create like this puppet master AI which is able to pretend to be a whole bunch of different characters, and that would allow you to essentially have like a bunch of different things. You could have things which like act like people, but they aren't actually like people per se. They don't actually have personhood like in the computational sense. And like I don't know if you could like extend this like lack of personhood from all the puppets, the puppet AIs, like I guess to the actual puppeteer. But if you could, then you could create like a system like where you have a bunch of these like a non-person puppet master AI, which is able to pretend to be a bunch of different like characters and interact with each other. And you could have those like perform a bunch of like menial like duties or like be characters in a game or something like I don't know. So it could potentially be a use case if we're able to figure out how that worked and we're able to verify that those like ethical issues wouldn't crop up, because you would have to be very wary about that. So yeah, that I guess is it for today. It's my thoughts on consciousness as like a computational phenomenon. Be sure to, I put a post about this like on my like Substack a while ago, so feel free to like look at that and read it, and also I guess subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Ecolopto's YouTube channel as well. So yeah,